Okay, this is a short one showing some experimental and theoretical paleontology, because paleontology embraces multitudes. So, way back when, the earliest examples we have of echinoderms are all stalked, and these are sessile. So, these are rooted to the ground essentially. And later, some of these things evolved to become free living, just like we saw with the crinoid, losing its stem after it developed a stem, and then becoming, or stalk rather, and then becoming free living. Because, of course, the stalk has bones in the middle and an endoderm and an ectoderm, kind of like, an arm. And so, yeah, it's weird to call it a stem, which is a plant structure for moving nutrients predominantly from the earth up into the plant. So, yeah, all right. Here we have the early development, and this is the graphic abstract of a paper, so it summarizes everything in one little figure, which is why I love it. Here we have our different groups. Among the first sort of free living echinoderms are these guys. And there's a bunch of different names for them. Uh, you'll hear me call them carpoids, but pleurocystides is the name of this particular one. And you'll recognize them because they have these plates. Look at these plates. It's a set of big plates that go around the edge. The mouth is going to be at the top. These two arms have little grooves in there with paired holes. That's the ambulacral grooves. So these are feeding arms. And then they're going to have this one appendage quite often down at the other end, which is going to be usually sort of curled up in some way when it fossilizes. And we think that is for mobility. And so the question they're trying to answer in this particular paper is moving toward or moving away? Which way is this thing going? Is it going toward the head, basically, or is it going away from the head? Is it moving toward the stalk? Yeah. And so they're showing what they did. They took 3D scans of some excellently preserved fossil from this. So there's their computerized data. And having seen some of these fossils, that looks a whole lot like it. They then put it into a physics simulation. So they simulated these things as being sort of rigid but able to flex in between the joints with a certain range of motion for each joint. And they're marking those as angles here. And they're saying, okay, within certain parameters of how much like a modern crinoid is able to flex its arms, because it's not all the way, and you can only do so much with the set of bones that they have. They can simulate it and say that, all right, this is the amount of torque that we think it would have as it's going through the process, sort of one sweep. And so they modeled the just sort of physical parameters there. Then they modeled this thing and saying, all right, let's say you're using this one appendage. You could either push with it, and so you could push away from the tail, or which would be toward the body, or you could stick it in and you could pull yourself along. You could do that and move toward. Yeah. Which is it going to be? Pleurocystides, movement toward or away? And they found that in theory, with their little cylinders, their little rubbery cylinders inside of a computer, it would do a much better job of moving. It could gain a lot more velocity. 0.3 centimeters per second. What? That's pretty good. If it is moving toward the body. So if it is moving like there's the head and it's moving in that direction. If it was trying to pull itself along, the way that it is set up, it would not be very good at that. And so this doesn't prove what it does, but remember what we said about evolution. It's not that you evolve a structure in order to do something. It's that you're stuck with a structure that you inherited, probably genetically, and now it's like, well, what's the best I can do with this? And then if that happens to work out, then good for you, good for evolution, good for everything. And you go on and maybe your kids are even more extreme. Yeah. Kids these days, I'll tell you. So then, just because they're a little bit extra, they decide to make a little robot out of some squishy parts that can sort of bend and some more rigid parts to make up the stem, kind of like the little skeleton of this little Pleurocystides. And they actually tested it out. They put it in a swimming pool and they made their little squishy robot swim along. And there's videos in that paper of their little squishy robot moving itself. And let me tell you, it doesn't look particularly effective, but it is a lot better at going forward than going in reverse. So these things were really good at pushing away, sort of waggling their tail, if you like, to move away than they were at moving toward. Yeah, it just it didn't really work like that. And so, yeah, with a little bit of practical experimental paleontology, they're able to figure out the probable motility pattern of some of these. And so now the next thing to do, obviously, is to look for ichnofossils right next to the bodies of these things and see if you can detect the trace of pushing this big fat head in front of you and the trace of these little basically tails waggling around side to side, because at least somewhere at some time that might have left a little bit of a mark. Although if it worked like their robot, it does a lot of flailing and not much moving, and so it would probably end up covering its own tracks pretty well. Yeah, so there you go. But thank you very much. This has been a one slide presentation. Wasn't that refreshing? I bet it was. Yeah. Okay.